Hi there, my name is Brian Vesterord. I'm from the company BV Energy, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about drinking water quality. Unfortunately, in almost all of our drinking water wells in Denmark, in fact across the entire country, we're finding quite a lot of pesticide and PFAS residues, and this is actually becoming a bigger and bigger problem for all of us. If you feel like Googling it, I think you should really try searching online and find some of the many articles that talk about this serious issue in detail. Take a look at these things. Here is just a tiny little selection of these various articles that I found online recently, and it's simply from a basic Google search where you look up the specific topic of drinking water quality. And you'll be able to see quite clearly that in a lot of different places, this really is a very serious problem. But the thing is, when you have these pesticides and PFAS chemicals, as I mentioned earlier, there are unfortunately residues of these in almost all drinking water today. A lot of drinking water sources stay below the threshold value that has been set for how much we are allowed to let through. You can't remove it completely, or rather theoretically you could remove everything from the waterworks, but it would be so expensive that people wouldn't be able to afford to buy water. And so what is the issue really when we've set this threshold value and we might be below it? Why isn't that good enough? Well, there are several problems. The first is that there are quite a few that are above the threshold value, but all those that are below the threshold value. You have to understand that this threshold value is something that has been set politically. If you ask the health authorities, they would say that the value should be zero, but as mentioned, that's physically impossible. So when these threshold values are negotiated, there are different parties at the negotiating table. You have Danish industry, Danish agriculture, environmental organizations, health professionals, and then you set some threshold values accordingly. You ask the health professionals, what threshold values should we set so that we don't believe we are being harmed by it? But there's an important word here, and that's believe. Because we believe we are not being harmed. What the health authorities have done is measure each of these toxins individually. And they've said, well, for this toxin, if it's below this threshold value, then we believe we are not being harmed by it. We don't know it 100%, but there is a possibility. We think it's actually reasonable, but as I said, we don't really know. But what hasn't been taken into account at all is what happens when we combine all these toxins in the body. The thing is, there are about 80 to 100 different toxins that are specifically measured in these cases. And we have absolutely no idea what happens when we mix these in our bodies. We don't think it harms us, but as I said, we really don't know. And when these limit values are set, as the healthcare professionals have said, when you're at the negotiating table, there are people who are very interested in making sure the limit isn't set as low as possible, because then they wouldn't be able to operate. On the other side, there are those who want the limit set much lower, and unfortunately, it ends up being a compromise. It may not be the right low point, but we have to do it, and this is a huge problem because we don't know what this does to the body. We don't think it harms us. I usually ask a lot of people, what is the reason you buy? Many people choose to buy organic fruits and fresh vegetables. And most people say, well, it's because I really want to avoid harmful pesticides on my stuff. Well, that's perfectly fine. But then in return, you might actually be rinsing your fruit and vegetables in pesticides and PFAS when you rinse them under the tap. Because that's actually what happens in many households. But fortunately, you can reduce this risk very significantly with some simple and accessible tools. And why exactly should you do this then to protect your health? Why should you consider getting a solution like this which can reduce it? Well, it's because we don't actually know what happens. We don't know what happens to our bodies. And as I usually say, well, I don't think it's something I want to put into my body. I don't want to put it into my children's bodies or anything else because I don't know what will happen. And that's why I want to take complete control of this myself, so that we can know for sure, or at least have a very high probability, that we've removed the vast majority of it. And that's why you should actually do this, because we have no idea what will happen. If you ask me personally, I think this is something that all residential installations, meaning every house in Denmark, apartments, etc., should have installed. Because when the waterworks can't remove everything, we have to take action on the problem ourselves. And what you actually do in practice, just to explain it, well, if I just switch over to this picture here, you can see here what you really do in practical terms is that we our water, it comes in here from the waterworks through a pipe, so to speak. So right after this pipe, we install what we call a two-filter housing here. A filter housing like this is about the size of a thermos flask. That's the best comparison I have, or about 30% bigger than a liter of milk, roughly speaking. But that means they're not particularly large. You install a filter set with two filters on it. First, you install what's called a pre-filter, and after the pre-filter, we install what we call an activated carbon filter. The primary role of a pre-filter, the only function it has, is to effectively protect our carbon filter. This pre-filter actually cleans our water by removing dirt, debris, and ochre. None of those things are harmful to your health. You might be surprised at how dirty the water actually is from the waterworks, because it all ends up in this. There you can see how dirty the water actually is. As I said, it's not anything harmful to your health, but you can see it in there, and this pre-filter then takes care of all that. Dirt, because when we move over to the carbon filter here, what it does is that it has protected it. So the carbon filter only needs to focus on removing these pesticides, PFAS, and actually bacteria as well. It also removes those from our water. A carbon filter is what you call an activated carbon filter. Activated carbon is an organic material, and activated carbon has the function that it kills pretty much everything that passes through a filter like this. So we actually remove with it 80 to 90% of all these pesticides, PFAS, and herbicides, which are also pesticides, bacteria, and so on. So it kills pretty much everything in its path. And that means that when the water comes out the other end, we have reduced all this dirt by between 80 to 90%. So we've really gotten a lot out of this. Activated carbon, just so you have a reference. What else do we use it for? Among other things, it's used in range hoods. Many people have those range hoods that don't vent outside, and in those cases, it's activated carbon. It's used on ships to purify seawater so it can be drunk. It's also widely used in industry to purify water for the food industry and also to clean water before it's discharged. So activated carbon is used in a lot of different places, and it's extremely effective. Then people ask, how much does something like this cost? Well, the installation of this set here isn't that expensive. It costs between 3,000 and 4,000 kroner, including a filter in each house. And what you do with these filters is that you change them twice a year. It's important to change these filters twice a year because after about 6 months, they stop working. It's especially the activated carbon you need to pay attention to here because by then the carbon is used up. That means it no longer has any effect. So that's why it's extremely important to change them twice a year. And if you actually leave them in for longer, they can have a harmful effect instead of a positive one. Because if they stay in for too long, this can actually also become a breeding ground for bacteria, which over time can actually make you seriously ill from this. That's why you change them twice a year. It's incredibly easy and simple to replace these filters. So it's something anyone can do with this one. And how much do these filters cost? Well, the pre-filter costs 199 kroner and the carbon filter costs 399 kroner. And as mentioned, you need 2 of each filter per year. That adds up to about 1,200 kroner or 100 kroner per month. The way our company has chosen to do it is that you pay it as a monthly payment instead of paying it once a year. Of course, you can also pay it once a year if you prefer. But that's what you do with these filters, and then we have everything working really well, and we've managed to reduce between 80 and 90% of all these toxins that get into our water. That's why this is something I really care about, and something I think everyone, I've said this before, but I'll say it again, I think it's something everyone should remember. It should have, because we really do get a lot of bad contaminants in our water. And as I said, it's been negotiated at a bargaining table and not decided by health authorities. So I hope this is something you'll seriously consider. It's definitely a strong recommendation from me. That's all for now. Thanks for your time. Bye.